let's jump right into it. It's been a long time. How long has it been? It's been, oof.
Oh, 3 years, 4 maybe.
Yeah. It almost feels longer than that.
It might be. It might be. Yeah.
For the people who've been following me for a while, they probably remember you from back when I was with the NRA and I had my CN Live show, and you came on as a guest, and we did I think it was about maybe like a 15-minute segment, 10-minute segment of sorts.
It might be a little bit longer. Yeah. But yeah, we did a little short thing. I still get some people come up to me every now and go, "Oh my God, you were on Noir," and I'm like, "Yeah, a long time ago."
Yeah. But I wanted to have you back on largely because of your background. For people who don't know what your background is, can you kind of do a quick deep sea dive into that? Okay.
As quick as I'll try to paraphrase as much as I can. Obviously, my accent kind of gives a lot of it away. I'm from England, the United Kingdom, and my first introduction to firearms was actually when I was a teenager. I was part of what's called the Combined Cadet Force, which is a Ministry of Defense run kind of Boy Scouts thing. But it kind of channels young people into either the Air Force, the Army, or the Navy. And basically you run around and it's a recruiting drive for the military. But one of those things is you get to use old firearms that they have there. So it's very focused, very, very safe. And I fired things like Lee Enfield 303s and crazy old guns like that. And then after I left college, so I was about 18 years old, I never touched a gun again because it's the United Kingdom. And unless you have a specific reason for having a firearm, which lots of people do, so there's a lot of myths about firearms access in the United Kingdom, but unless you have a reason to have one, people don't have them. So I never touched one again until I was about 26, because by then I was in the police force. Okay. I joined the police at 23, and I joined the British Police. And one of the directions you can go is to become an AFO, an armed firearms officer, authorized firearms officer. And then within those ranks, there are different levels. And to cut a long story short, I worked my way up to becoming a counterterrorism SFO within the London Metropolitan Police. So we were trained in a variety of tactics with a variety of weapons platforms and trained to a very high standard. And my total career within that was a little over 11 years, and I became an instructor for them as well. So operational deployments for diplomatic protection, royalty protection. We worked things like the Olympics. I was there for POTUS when he came over, the royal wedding between William and Kate. So all those kind of events alongside regular crime within the capital, major incidents about happening, kidnappings, all that sort of stuff that goes on, along with counterterrorism operations, which happen more frequently than people probably realize.
Really?
Yeah. So that's my background within the world of firearms and how to use them operationally.
Gotcha. So when we talk about, I want to kind of go back to what you said about the kind of myths about there not being any guns in the UK. So what type of guns, generally speaking, do most people who do have them have in the UK?
So within the UK, anybody can have a shotgun, anybody at all. You just have to apply. Now, the way it works is you have to submit an application that gets checked out, and it takes months. It's not like here where you just walk in and then, you do a quick background check. It takes months, and you have to have a gun safe and you have to have an ammunition safe, and they have to be separate. Theoretically, the police could come round at any time and check that you have these in place. The realities are that they generally don't, because they don't have time. But the police have to have a reason to deny you a shotgun license.
Okay.
So that would be like you're a criminal.
Okay.
And typically the people that have them will have them for clay shooting, or if they live near a farm for kind of pest control, that sort of thing. But most people are getting them for clays, just do that sort of thing. But it's still fairly fringe. Not many people do it. You're kind of a bit odd if you have a shotgun, unless you're a farmer.
Now, when we say shotguns, are we talking pumps and brake action, or are you allowed to have a semi-auto, like say for instance, a Benelli M4?
No. You can have any kind of a side-by-side or over and under.
Okay.
You could have a pump, but it's got to have the baffle in it that makes it only shoot 3 shots maximum. Okay. So that's 1 in the breech and 2 in the magazine. Semi-auto's a bit of a no-no. Although the police, we had them. But yeah, the general public can't. No. Now, when it comes to rifle, sorry.
I just want to talk about real quick, the police thing, right? Because there's this conception the police in the UK don't carry firearms, and I'm assuming there's a certain branch of them that do and a certain branch that don't. So from an American contextual standpoint, how does that work in relation to, say, for instance, like your kind of traditional beat cop versus like SWAT, so forth and so on?
Okay, so your traditional beat cop does not carry a gun. Full stop. I would say, I don't have the exact numbers, but just kind of thinking off the top of my head, I would say 98% of cops are not armed within the UK. And we used other tactics. Some of them will have tasers, some of them will have incapacitant sprays, but usually it's just no firearms. Then there are different tiers of armed officers. The most basic ones are, as I said, the AFOs, authorized firearms officers. Then you get ones who will split off into all the different agencies. So you've got immediate response vehicles, so they respond to spontaneous acts of violence. It doesn't have to be a firearm, so it could be someone otherwise so dangerous. So someone running around the street with an axe,
Gotcha.
They're going to send firearms officers. Someone running around with explosives, they're going to send firearms officers. The trouble is there's a delay because they tend to go to the scene where things have already happened.
Yeah.
But sometimes, they happen to be fairly nearby. One of the most interesting things was the lessons learned in America from active shooters were very much taken on by the UK. So the concept that if you happen to be an AFO and you happen to be currently armed and you're the closest, well, you're going in. So if you were near a shopping mall or a school or any public place and there was an active shooter event, it didn't matter what level of AFO you were expected to go forward and to handle the threat. Because the guys that do all the training, the SFOs, which was what I ended up as, it would take us even longer to get there because we were like the SWAT guys who would come in. Now, if it was a pre-planned event, so we thought it might be, so for example, at a wedding or something like that, then we were basically a QRF, we were a quick reaction force who were just around the corner, and we would be there to rush in on a number of deployment strategies because being the capital, it's hard to move around. So we would use things like motorcycles or cars or whatever. We had other ways to get around because we got the Thames, we had boats, we had all sorts of things. So it was fun. But
yeah, no, it's man. When I think about the UK and this is constant comparison from a gun control standpoint. Well, one thing for sure, it's a different culture. It's completely different.
Yeah, it's not apples for apples. Yeah. It's very different. Yeah.
And I think to try to have that conversation or to make that kind of comparison, honestly, is a little disingenuous if you don't factor in the fact that it's a different culture. I try
to explain that to people all the time here. Yeah. I'm like,
So, I mean, from your experience, so what is your take from being in UK and then coming over now here to America and living here and being amongst our culture, especially when it comes to firearms and so forth and so on? What's your perspective, especially through the eyes of an officer?
Okay, so it's a very complicated issue, but it's actually quite simple to kind of conceptualize. So in the UK, for many, many, many years, there was a very strict gun control system set up where, like I explained with a shotgun, anybody could have a shotgun, but you had to go through a lengthy licensing procedure. Anybody can have a rifle as well. When I say a rifle, I mean, 308, 7.62, 5.56, repeating rifles. You just have to have a reason to use that. They'll come to where you're going to shoot it.
Now, we're not talking like AR pattern type rifles.
No. Now, you used to be able to have those up until one instant of active shooter in the 1970s or in the 80s. And then they banned those. But you can still have powerful firearms, powerful rifles. You just have to have a reason for using them and a place that is audited by the police as appropriate for that use. Nobody can own a pistol unless, curiously, you permanently weld a suppressor onto it, because in the UK, a rifle is defined by the barrel length. So if you permanently TIG weld a suppressor It's a rifle. So they have 3-gun competitions, but everyone's running around with suppressed pistols. Yeah.
That's hilarious here because it's like pulling teeth over here to get a suppressor,
what?
right? But I guess it technically would be the same because the process to get the handgun in and of itself is just as tedious, if not more, than us trying to get suppressors here, I guess. So I guess
more so, yeah, more so. It's and I'm not talking Glocks. I mean, we're talking like Ruger, Mark IVs.
Okay. So like 22s.
That sort of thing. Anywho, the process in the UK is everybody and anybody who has legal possession of a firearm has they're on a central computer database, like it's a national one. So if you were stopped driving a motor vehicle, it flags up this person is a firearms owner. Okay. Just automatically, okay. Which I know Americans are like, oh my God, but that's just the way it is in the UK. So all the legally held firearms are accounted for. Well, I'm not talking about the illegally held firearms, of which there are many, but all the legally held firearms are accounted
I'm sure we'll get to that.
Oh yeah. So when they had a recall, so for example, when they had the gentleman who ran around with an AK, shot lots of people, and the government said, okay, we're not going to allow those. They just wrote to everybody who had military-style firearms and said, you've got 3 months to hand them in. And that was it. Boom, all done.
It's interesting.
So,
most people think it's like, oh no, they're never going to go door to door. And I've always made the argument. I said they don't have to.
No, they don't have to. No, they just write to you and say, if they have a database, they just write and say, hey, and if you don't hand it in and you don't have a receipt, okay, well now you're a criminal. Yeah. So in America, I say the problem, well, not the problem, but the issue is that the genie's out of the bottle. The guns are out, and people have them legitimately, legally, and there is no database. So if you were to conceptually say, okay, we're going to ban AR-15s, well, how? And that's the simple question. How would you do that? How would you practice? Well, we would just make them illegal. Okay, but how are you going to get them? How are you physically going to find out who has them, where they are? And then if you have some people who, fairly reasonably or not, depending on their own kind of where they draw their line in the sand, if they decide, well, no, I'm not. Who's going to go and get them? Because I haven't met one police officer here that says, oh yeah, I'll go and get that. Just no, we're going to precipitate problems. So it isn't the same culture, and also, let's be honest, the whole American culture was based upon the common man forming militias and rising up against the British.
You guys.
And so it's ingrained in that mindset. And I try to explain to people as well. A lot of people, they forget their history. Like I'm not talking hundreds of years ago. Like the Wild West was in the late 1800s. That's your grandparents' time, when people legitimately had to defend themselves. When people, they still do. They still use rifles for hunting, and you still have to have powerful handguns to defend yourself. And if you say you don't, I challenge you to walk around like the wilderness here, and when you come across one of those big pigs running around, you want something, even if it's just to make noise. It is not the same culture. In England, we don't have huge pigs, we don't have wolves, we don't have bears, we don't have moose, we don't have there's just these big things running around trying to eat you. We don't have them. Also we don't have Bloods and Crips. We don't have you know what I mean? We don't have those issues. Now we do have gangs and we do have armed criminality, but in the UK the armed criminality are kind of a little bit savvy. They shoot each other with great regularity, but they don't shoot innocents, because that brings a lot of heat. So there are near daily shootings in the capital. You just don't hear about them.
I try telling, I'm telling you, I try telling people that. I'm like, our society is extremely open. All our information, all our bad information, all our good information, all our dirt is out there for the world to see, because of the way our country is structured, as far as our First Amendment rights and all the information that we have, and that we're allowed to be put out there. Whereas a lot of other countries are not as liberal with the information that they give out to the world with respect to their dirt.
No, it's not just being liberal. It's just they just don't talk about it. So I'm gonna tell you about a thing now, which isn't a secret. So I'm not breaching any laws. There is an ongoing task force in the capital. It's called Operation Trident. You might be able to look it up. I don't know. The raison d'etre for Operation Trident is to tackle black on black shootings. That's it.
That's crazy.
That's all they do. That's all they do.
That's
full time. And they were one of the biggest service, like that was one of the biggest things that I did.
Yeah.
Was run around the Capitol taking guns from young black men who were trying to shoot each other. Because the same problems in America are the same problems in the United Kingdom. And it's all to do with societal inequalities. It's all to do with upbringing. It's all to do with a lack of opportunities. And that kind of, when you get into the communities and you work with these young people and you build them up and you set them up for success, they become successful. But if the inner cities have nothing for them to do with poor educational systems and no job prospects, and they're thinking, well, how am I going to make money?
Pretty much. Yeah.
And then they look at their buddy who's driving a nice BMW or an Audi, and they're like,
I want that.
I want that. Yeah. And so, anyways, there is a lot of armed criminality in England. It just doesn't get reported.
I mean, I actually saw recently. I mean, this was probably yesterday. I wish I kept the video, but I literally saw, like, it was basically guys running around with knives chasing another guy trying to stab him. Right? Yeah. And it looked so eerily similar to what you would see in Southside Chicago, except they were using knives in this instance. Where in Southside Chicago or other places like it, they'd be using firearms. And I always say it. It's like it's going to be a culture problem, and then the culture is largely driven from the environment that the vast majority of these people are living in. And I always make the analogy. I was like, you don't see well-to-do black kids in the suburbs doing drive-bys in Mercedes Benzes and BMWs. You just don't see it. But it's a lot easier to hyper-focus on the item because, I mean, at some point there was talks about banning certain knives in the UK. Am I correct?
There's not talk of it. That is a thing. Yeah, you can't own certain types of knife. Now, just to put that into context, if you were to walk around the streets of London, what would you be doing, or where would you be that the police would randomly stop and search you?
In the inner city.
That's kind of yeah. But you could carry, so like my uncle, this is a bad story, my uncle who came to visit from Trinidad, half my family are from the Caribbean, and he came to visit me, and as a gift he brought me a knife, and he's handing it to me outside the Tower of London, which is a big, and I'm like, oh shit. Yeah. You can't carry this around because it was a really nice locking blade. I forget the brand, but a great knife, very illegal. You can't have it. So I was like, let me just move along with that. And he's just carrying it around because he's like, oh, I brought you a present. You can basically have a Swiss Army knife. That's it. So it can't be a locking blade. It can't be more than 3 inches in length. You can't carry big swords and machetes around or anything like that.
So it's like flying.
Yes, yeah. It's almost.
You can't carry, but
and even if you do carry a knife, you kind of have to have a reason for it. So, like, if you were carrying a box cutter, now if you were going to and from work and you had a box cutter and you said, "Well, I work in a warehouse," they'd be like, "Okay, fine." But if you're out 8 o'clock Friday night in a clubbing area and you've got a box cutter, you will be arrested for carrying a box cutter. Gotcha. Because that is, there was a time when they were really popular. What they would do, they would put 2 blades in the box cutters and put a penny in between the blades. So now you've got 2 thin blades, and when you slash somebody, you can't stitch it up. You see, it leaves a bad scar. So the young violent people are very creative with their knife work. They're very, very violent. Because that's what they have, easily accessible.
It's pretty nutty, man. But again, like you get the similarities between America and in the UK in terms of just the kind of inherent culture, so to speak, in terms of where the vast majority of the violence is coming from. Generally speaking, coming from very, very specific areas. And then I'm assuming in those areas, just like in America, everyone in the inner city isn't violent. Not even close,
not at all. No.
But there's a minority of people, I'm assuming, same in the UK, that are responsible for the vast majority of the violence activity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And particularly in the capital, what's interesting is those groups will form along either ethnic lines or racial lines, or just where they happen to live lines. So you get a postcode gangs, which is nothing more than just luck as to where you grow up. Just then you've got you've got the more organized gangs. You've got the Russian gangs, the Turkish gangs, the Chinese gangs, the homegrown British gangs, and they all kind of vie for territory and they do their thing. But they're kind of weird. They kind of keep themselves to themselves. They just they're very violent within their own little circles, but they don't. It doesn't bleed out anywhere. And then of course we've got the terrorist things that go on obviously all the time, which is an issue, but.
I mean, there's also that dynamic that, you guys, you don't have a massive body of water to the degree that we do, separating us from pretty much the rest of the world, right? There's that border issue where it's easy to cross borders to and fro, generally speaking, and so you kind of get that, which is weird because you kind of also get, like you just pointed out, there's a multicultural aspect to it that is also very similar to what we have here in the U.S.
Yeah.
And so now, in your time, I'm going to kind of go into like gun geek mode a little bit here.
Sure.
What was largely the platform of choice when you were kind of out doing your thing?
So I spent the majority of my time undercover.
Okay.
And my go-to was a Glock 19.
Okay.
Yeah, I've put tens of thousands of rounds through a Glock 19 in training. I also had a 17 and a 26. Which would depend purely upon. So the 17 I tended to use, like, I wish I had some photos to show you. Maybe I'll send you some and you can kind of
put them up. Yeah.
But I've got an amusing one of me in the basement of Buckingham Palace, actually, where I've got a ridiculous loadout because they wanted me to do multiple roles, and I'm just standing there with all this gear thinking I'm operationally effective here because I've got so much kit. But anyway, the 17 was typically on a drop leg, which I would use in when we're wearing the coveralls. The 19 or the 26 was what I would have if I was covertly deployed. And then when it came to the carbine, it was either going to be an MP5 or we had the SIG variant of an MP4. Of AR-15, so we'd use an M4 variant, which was a SIG one. I think it's a 516. Now we had other things as well available. I liked the Remington 870 shotgun because of its simplicity. We did have the Benellis. I just preferred the Remington because my role was a breacher, so I would be taking out the hinges or shooting out the tires. I shot a lot of cars in the UK.
Really?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. All right, let's talk about that. So you don't hear that often, right? And it sounds very movie-esque. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what would happen is for example, if you've got a kidnapped victim or just a major, a guy that's carrying a gun, or there are bad people in the car, we need to stop that car. So we would do vehicle tactics to bring it to a stop, but of course they don't want to stop. They're going to try and keep going. Now, if they show any signs of trying to kind of force their way out, we had a dispersible round called a Hatton round, and they come in different flavors. You get lead ones, iron ones, copper ones, and basically it's compressed lead powder in like a wax kind of thing to hold it in shape.
Gotcha.
Essentially what happens is when you shoot a tire, it will punch a hole in the tire, which is just a little hole. But then when it hits the wheel, now if it's an iron wheel, it punches a hole in it about yay big, and then it goes and disperses. But if it's an alloy wheel, it just cracks the wheel. Okay. So it kind of splits the wheel in half, and you get instant tire deflation. And if it's an alloy wheel, now the wheel won't even turn; it gets all tied up in the rotors and all that kind of stuff. So and also the tactical distraction it had, because you've got the people in the car; they're all trying to get out. They're like, "Oh, we're roughy tufties. We've just robbed a bank or whatever they've done." Yeah. Someone like me jumps out with a balaclava on with a pump action shotgun and go boom, shoot out one of their wheels, run a. They're just like, because it's England and that doesn't happen. But yeah, it does, and we would it's not a approved anti-personnel round. That was always a matter of discussion as to if they pointed a gun at us and you happened to have it with you, there'd be a few questions to answer if you shot someone with it, because it'd be a nasty injury. But Yeah,
no, I mean, that's pretty freaking awesome if you ask me. Yeah. So what ended up bringing you to America?
Well, I met a girl and got married. And then due to political, personal, financial reasons, we moved over to the States, and you kind of have to reinvent yourself. Yeah. I came over with all these experiences, and I became an NRA instructor. I have a training company that I do on the side, but it is just on the side because there are some, and I hope we get to talk about that a little bit later. There are some kind of training issues within US culture. If you want. Oh yeah. So first and foremost, let me be absolutely clear. I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment. I think it's fantastic. However, it does alarm me that many people, in fact, the majority of people, they just kind of go out and get a gun. Mm-hmm. And they've probably been shown how to load it and shoot it by a family member or a friend or something like that, but they don't actually know how to use it, particularly in a confrontational situation at the kind of ranges that confrontational situations actually occur in, which are really, really close. Yeah. It's not going to be 15 yards at a static target that's just going to stand there. You're not going to be able to get your nice isosceles stance. You're not going to get this nice, beautiful sight picture. You're not going to be able to and squeeze off like a nice little group. It's not going to happen. It's going to be up close, personal, dirty, scary as hell.
So it's kind of like martial arts versus MMA.
Yes, yeah, kind of. Although I would like MMA's better. It's kind of like
when I say martial arts, I'm talking like you're more kind of traditional style of, like, say, for instance, Taekwondo, things of that nature.
Yeah, and then they step in a cage and they get their asses handed to them. Yeah. Which is sad, but true. For those watching, I'm a 5th degree black belt in Taekwondo, so I can bash them all out. I know exactly what it feels like to step in a cage. I know what it feels like.
I didn't know that. That's freaking awesome.
Yeah. When they lock that cage and it's just you and a dude and a ref, and you go, why am I here? What am I doing? Yeah. Then they go fight. You're like, oh shit.
Like this, everybody has a plan to get punched in the face.
That is very true. Yeah. I have the broken eye socket to prove it. But anyway,
I got punched in the face with gloves. So I mean, for me, I still have my eye sockets, right?
It still hurts. It still hurts. But regardless, I do think there needs to be a sensible discussion, a debate, a coming together of minds. And I don't mean the extremes on either end. I mean sensible people that actually have something to offer and say, how can we improve firearms safety? How can we make people more aware about the benefits of firearm ownership versus the drawbacks of firearm ownership, and how you should be responsible in where you keep them? Like, the tragedies we hear about where children get hold of guns. And I just want to face plant because I'm like, that just feeds into the anti-gun narrative so awfully, because that individual has been irresponsible. And there are existing very comprehensive gun laws that legislate against that. We don't need to make anything else up. It's already there in place. We just need to enforce it properly and educate people as to why it's important.
I think I get your frustration, because I'm kind of in the same realm from the standpoint when it comes to training. Right? I think in a perfect world, I'd make it absolutely mandatory to get training in a perfect world. However, because we don't live in a perfect world, because we do have political figures who are in positions of power who try to utilize a mandate as a way to further restrict people's ability to get firearms. I can't be a proponent of that within the real world, right? Yeah. Because I know how that'll be used. But, and I always say this in my videos, like, I absolutely believe there's absolutely no reason why you should get a firearm and not get some type of training above and beyond just understanding the basic mechanics. And that's me personally.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I feel. Yeah. I always say I would take somebody with a $300 gun. Like, if I gave you a high point, what's that one they've got? I nearly bought one because it's so funny. The Yeet cannon. I would take someone with a Yeet cannon with $1,000 worth of training over somebody with the latest SIG X whatever with no training.
Yeah.
Because the person with the heat cannon is going to know what they're doing, and they're going to be accurate and they're going to be effective. Whereas I've got this great gun, and do you know how to use it?
I don't know how to use it.
I don't know.
I mean, it's no different.
It falls out. Yeah.
It's no different than buying a supercar, and really, honestly, only driving it on the streets, and never really, maybe even worse than this, because at least with a supercar, you get the experience of continuously driving it down the street. Whereas with the firearm, generally speaking, you don't necessarily get that. But I think where it runs into a problem is because there's that political component, right? How it can be misused and mishandled. But then there's also the financial. I know, like for me, that's not that big of an issue. And then plus, I have the liberty because of who I am within the space. I can go and get the necessary types of training, and even more so, right?
Sure.
So I think there's that aspect of it that's very limiting, and then you got the time component, and then so forth and so on. There are a lot of barriers, right, that are naturally in place that prevent people from being able to get the training they should get. That said, this should be the heart of the conversation about firearms in the country, is figuring out how do we create an environment that allows people to be able to do and get the necessary training that they should get. The problem is when we have that conversation, then all this other stuff starts getting thrown into it, banning AR-15s and extended background checks that won't do anything, so forth and so on. And it just confuses the point, confuses the issue.
So I work in healthcare right now. That's how I pay the bills, and I see a lot of people who are having acute mental issues, acute psychological problems. And you get people talking about, oh, if you've ever been under medical care for a psych issue, and they're like, whoa, time out. Don't do that. Don't do that. Because a lot of the majority of these people, it's temporary. They're going through a rough time. They're going through divorce, bereavement, a job loss or something. And/or you start making it so there are consequences like losing all their guns. They're not going to go and get the help they need.
Exactly.
So those sort of conversations, it's like you say, it's that political side where we should just ban everyone who's had a psych issue. No, we shouldn't. You don't need to. It's not necessary. We need to mandate that everybody has to have training. Okay, well, you do that, and then that will be used. Then that will be weaponized.
Nice, yep.
Then that will be used to prevent people being able to get. But at the same time, like you, I'm like, everybody should be able to get what they want. But I just personally really, really strongly urge you to get appropriate training so that you're safe and you're effective in whatever you want to do. If you want to, like if you want to learn to hunt, I'm not your guy. I'm not, because I don't know enough about hunting. But if you want to learn to fight with a gun up close, well, let's talk.
No, and I mean, I'm right there with you. I mean, you can even say the same thing from a legal standpoint, right? Because I'm a member of USCCA, and one of the biggest,
high five.
I didn't even know that. So, and for me, one of the biggest issues, I hear people talk all the time about certain scenarios and situations where they feel like they would use a firearm to protect themselves, and I'm kind of like, it's a bit dicey. Probably it's not going to be as clear-cut.
Be real careful. Be real careful.
But when you start getting this information and you actually start taking the thought process, because one thing, and I suffered from this too when I started carrying a firearm, I would always, every possible situation I thought I could find myself in, everything happened perfectly. Everything was perfect. Like, it was like, I see the guy coming. I know exactly what he's going to do. And I'm like, I'm going to have time to get this beautiful draw. And then I'm going to stop. And then, all this, all of that. And once I started allowing myself to start letting my mind go to the dirty, and by dirty meaning like everything doesn't happen perfectly. What if I don't see it coming? What if I'm not really sure if I can shoot or not? That starts changing your perspective and your mindset about how you go into the real world when you carry a firearm. So now your mind's already kind of gone there. So it's not the first time you're experiencing things going completely bad and nothing going perfectly.
Welcome to the life of a police officer.
There you go.
Yeah. And those kind of funny little gray areas and weirdness, and it's not perfect. Like, for example, when cops shoot someone in the back and everyone goes, oh my God, they shot them in the back, they're running away. And it's like, well, okay, well, this is how you get shot in the back. like, that's how you get shot in the back. And I'm not saying, okay, first off, time out. I'm not saying that all police officers don't need to be looked at. I'm not saying their actions are impeccable every time. I'm not saying that there aren't bad apples. But most of the cops that I talk to now are extremely low in morale. They're extremely concerned about. I mean, they're terrified of being involved in a shooting because of the consequences that would happen. And I try and kind of pass it on to civilians as well. Like when I'm training them and saying, okay, so let's say legally, from a criminal point of view, you survive a lethal threat encounter and you shoot somebody and they're dead. Okay. What about the civil side of things? Are you going to be able to get away with that? What about the sleepless nights that you're going to go through as you replay it over and over and over again? What about your mental health? What about the friends and family that are going to stop being your friends and family because you're now a murderer? What about how you're going to have to move house because the family of who they now know where you live? What about there's this huge thing. I mean, I carry a gun every day. And I really don't want to use it.
Dude, I'm right there with you. I was having a conversation with a friend once, and we were like, when you really sit down and think about everything, all the collateral effects that happen after you use your gun in self-defense, man, you really don't want to do it. Like, you really genuinely do not want to do it. And I've never really glorified the idea of it, but I know for a fact, man, I really, like, if I have to use my gun in self-defense, I'm going to need therapy. I know that for a fact. Because it's just not something that you just want to do. But nonetheless, there are a lot of people out there who don't really understand that. No,
and they're very gung ho about it. I taught them their entire self-defense plan is I'll draw my gun and shoot them, and you're like, that's not a plan. That's just well, what if this happens? I'll draw my gun, I'll shoot them.
Yeah.
You're in a Walmart parking lot. What do you carry? I carry a 1911 45 ACP. Oh my God, you're going to start shooting that in Walmart? Like, what are you thinking? And they look at me like, what? I'm like, the overpenetration alone, you're going to kill half a dozen people with that hand cannon. They're like, no, I won't. It's proven. Oh God, here we go. It is a great gun. Yeah. It is a great gun.
I love 1911s personally. Now,
it's not what I would carry, but it is a great gun.
Yeah. No, and I mean, truth be told, and I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. I'm leaning more towards the side of give me a 1911 in 9mm more so than in 45. That's just...
because it's got the nice heavy slide. Yep. You got those follow-up shots. You get more rounds in there. That's a great platform. It's the good platform with a better round because the 9mm plus P performs just as well as a 45. Yes, it does. You can look it up.
I mean, no, I tell people that all the time. I was like, they ask me, like, why do you carry 9? I was like, because with the advancements we have in bullet technology, I mean, they're all, the differences are marginal, if not exactly the same. And so for me, I'm just kind of like, give me a 9. I want as many rounds as I can shoot fast and accurately.
Yep, absolutely. And this is kind of morbid, but another offshoot of working in EMS is I get to see quite a few gunshot injuries, and I'm kind of a bit nerdy about it. I kind of say, oh, that's interesting. Look at the path. Look at how that worked, or look at how this person has been shot 8 times and they're okay. Oh, this person only got shot once. It's really. The only consistency I can really say is if you're a little bit. How can I put this politely? If there's more of you. You seem to soak up rounds a bit better. That's about the only thing I can say. Is these people that are a bit more.
I've never thought about that.
They seem to soak up the rounds.
When you think about it, it makes sense. I guess it would be no different than, if I had a ton of clothing on or something of the sort. There's that's about the only consistency. Yeah, but just the ballistic trajectory as it hits. Mm-hmm.
I mean, they go in. Sometimes they go in and out. Sometimes they go in and sometimes they go and hit a bone and careen off. Sometimes they go and hit a bone and shatter it. Sometimes crazy stuff. They get shot in the head. It hits the skull, goes around underneath the scalp, comes out the other side, and you think they've been shot in the head, but they actually haven't. They've just been shot around it. I don't know how that happens. Yeah. Weird stuff. They're very weird.
That is nutty.
And almost always they're unfortunate. Sometimes amusing. And when I say that, it's the ones that kind of roll in. Mm-hmm. Get kicked out of a car, flopping around and like, what happened? I don't know. Who shot you? I don't know. Why? No idea. You're like, come on, look, I don't care. I don't care. Just tell me what happened so I can help.
No, I totally get it, man. But you know, I mean, there's so much we could cover here.
We could go on and on all day.
Yeah, pretty much. But perfect excuse to have you back on. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can kind of split it up. But essentially speaking, I mean, the main thrust is UK and the US, they're not the same. Mm-hmm. They speak kind of the same language. Roughly speaking.
I will say this. I am thoroughly impressed with the way you guys are able to mimic the American accent, because I can't do it at all. Really?
Oh, I'm terrible. I'm terrible.
Maybe I'm just going. You know, maybe I'm just going off the actors and the actresses.
Probably, yeah. Because they are good. Yeah, they are good.
Very good. Because half the time I'm like, I didn't know they were not American. You know, and it happens all the time. So I'll give you guys that.
I've kind of modulated my accent. It's become flatter and more neutral. Mm-hmm. Like from, you know, when I was working in London, I had to be a bit more like Jason Statham. You know what I mean? All right, mate. All right, Treacle now. How's it going?
I know Jason gives me a little bit of that with like an undertone of Irish, you know. Like.
But so you know, they're not the same cultures. It is inappropriate and just. It's not an argument that's going to go anywhere when you try to say, but in the UK they did this, so we should do it. It's not the same culture. It's not going to work. There are logistical problems to overcome, cultural problems, and practicalities of it. I just don't think it works. Now, I also do think that we need to have sensible debates, discussions. There is some problems that we have to address. We can't walk away from and ignore and say, it's all down to this, or it's all down to that. We need to say, okay, well, how can we try to stop inappropriate people doing inappropriate things? And I would love to be at that table and try to thrash some ideas out, but
I think the problem
it's complicated.
That's just it. I think there's this incessant desire to oversimplify it and get a quick solution, and in doing so, that's where you end up with this kind of conversational stalemate, where the conversation can't go anywhere because we're oversimplifying what is essentially an extremely complex issue.
Yeah.
And so the longer we do that, the more there's not going to really be any advancements as far as the conversation is concerned. Now,
no.
I definitely try to educate the masses as much as possible, at least from my perspective of the issue. And, you know, our side is generally speaking more than willing to have that conversation with somebody on the other side. I don't know if I can say the same for the other side.
Yeah, it tends to be very inflammatory and very emotional. Mm-hmm. And ideological.
To a degree, understandably so. I'm not so naive as to say, like, I don't understand why you're so emotional about people getting shot. Like, I get it. But
and I always try to say that to, you know, people in England, it's like, okay, so, you know, and they say, well, why do you need a gun? And I say, okay, let's just pretend that where I live there are no lethal threats. Let's just pretend the light goes away. I enjoy firearms. I enjoy shooting them. I enjoy going to the range and hanging out with my buddies and shooting guns because it's fun.
Yeah.
You could say the same thing about your sports car that you mentioned. There's no need to own a sports car that will do 100, 150, absolutely 200 miles an hour. There's no need for it. Let's ban them all. Let's get rid of them because they're unnecessary. Let's only have cars that do 85 miles an hour. And, you know, but people you can't do that. Why would you do that? Because it's fun having a nice... I have a performance car that goes nicely. I don't drive it within the speed limit all the time. I just... but I don't drive it at 150 miles an hour all the time either because I kind of... There's not many places I'd be able to do that. But it would do that if I wanted to.
You're enjoying the gray, as I like to call it.
I enjoy the performance. I enjoy the way it sounds. I enjoy the way it handles. I enjoy the way it moves. I have a motorcycle that, again, very, very fast. It's dangerous. There's no need to own a motorcycle at all.
Hell, I don't have a motorcycle because I think it's dangerous.
You know, it's just ridiculous. But I've had the training. Mm-hmm. I've had a lot of experience. I ride responsibly for me. So why should another group who have suffered loss, someone whose uncle, son, brother the daughter has died on a motorcycle and feel that they're unnecessary, and they decide to turn around and say, well, you can't have a bike. Well, that's not fair.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of, and I think a lot of people miss that it's not all about some kind of machismo. I want to run around, and the idiots that walk around Walmart with their open carry, with their inappropriate holsters and stuff. I'm just like, oh God.
I know you're going to get pushback for that.
Yeah, that's okay. But you know the ones I mean. I'm not talking about the ones that look like they know what they're doing.
Me personally, I've never open carried. Unless you count like when I'm kind of out and, you know, I'm hunting and doing stuff like that.
That's a different environment. In an inner city, there's no need for it. It's tactically unsound, and you scare people. You scare people. That'd be like me running around, I don't know, waving a sword around above my head. And people, what are you doing? Well, I'm allowed to have this. Someone is going to be alarmed and distressed by that behavior, aren't they? So let's just
I've heard arguments on the contrary that say, you know, well, the more people do it, the more people get used to it, and then they'll get used to seeing firearms on people in the open versus kind of hiding it. I don't know. Tactically, I'm not really prone to open carry. No. Culturally, I'm indifferent, honestly. I see it sometimes. Like if I see, you know, like a guy's open carrying in Walmart, I'm kind of like.
Okay, I'm going to say something that really will get some inflammatory remarks from your listeners. People like me who have training, and I have a lot of friends that are like this, so they will laugh. You are just a holster for me. If you open carry. I can and would take that from you, and you would not be able to stop me. Well, I'll draw my gun and shoot you. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't. And I know how retention holsters work, and bad people practice how to do it. They practice how to get cops' guns. It's just,
the funny thing is, I went from carrying at 3 o'clock to appendix because I like the idea of knowing exactly where my gun is and having complete control of it all the time, versus having it on the side, even though concealed. I don't like the idea that I don't know what's going on as far as people having access to it.
Yeah, so it's within your fighting arc.
Exactly. So I'm with you from that standpoint. I'm not prone to open carry largely because I don't like the exposure, especially walking around in the city. I just don't care.
I don't want anybody to know. I want to be a complete surprise. Like what I'm going to do, I'm going to be running away with everybody else. I'm going to be getting my nice fast car and driving away. I would have to be cornered before you even knew it was. It's just.
And that's largely my kind of mentality from a concealed carry standpoint is my back needs to be against the wall. Me personally, I'm not going to tell anybody else how they decide how they want to protect themselves, but if I can find a way out, I will. That's me. Unless I'm in a situation where I'm with somebody that I truly care about and they don't have the option or the ability to do that, I'm not inclined to try to be a hero of sorts. Now, I can talk all this nonsense now and then something go down, and I could be in a situation where I could just leave, or I can shoot this guy real easily and stop everybody else from getting shot, and I probably will do that.
Well, who knows? But that's if you were in the right place at the right time. And there are lots of examples of that happening. Yeah, there are lots of examples where that's happened, and I take note of all the examples that come up where some lunatic pulls a gun out in a shopping mall. They go bap bap, and then a concealed carry holder goes boom. Exactly. And it's all over, and it doesn't make the news. it just kind of comes up in these little feeds and it goes, disappears. And you're like, wait, that was an active shooter that got stopped by a good guy. No.
Look over here. Look over here.
Look over here. Oh, look, there's something else happening. There's a wall over here.
I just did a and then I'll make this the last point. I just did a scenario-based training with USCCA, and nice. There was a situation where I had the option where I could have just left. I told the person I was with to leave, and then I stayed and then dealt with the threat. And ironically enough, talking about what you were talking about earlier with respect to cops shooting people in the back, probably getting way too much information because the video's not even out yet, but the benefit of watching the podcast, right? I remember, so after I shot the guy, and they asked me, how many times did you shoot him? And I said 3. Like, I know when I shoot 3 shots, bang, bang, bang. They were like, you shot 8.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
That whole perceptual distortion, and yep.
And so
You just kept shooting. You just kept shooting until the threat went away.
basically,
That's what happened.
and the funny thing is, I shot him in the back too.
Yep.
So basically, I had kind of like a sideways angle, and as he started training his gun onto me, I took mine out. I shot, bang, 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 and as he got hit a couple times because we're wearing stress vest, and so he's getting shocked. And he's like, oh, shit. And then he turns to run, right? So I'm bang, bang, bang. And he's like, da, da, da. And then he turns to run, and I got him in the back. So that was eye-opening for me. It was incredibly eye-opening for me. I always knew that dynamic could, exist from the standpoint of how you could end up shooting somebody, but to experience it, not on a real level, of course, but just in that heightened environment.
And that kind of training is fantastic. I've actually... I'm just in the process of finishing writing my second book. I've written 2 books now, and this book is called "So You Want to Get a Gun," and which will be out on Amazon very, very soon. Yeah. And basically, I talk about all the pros and cons of getting a gun. But I say you need at a minimum to get your safety training by someone that knows what they're doing, not your dad, your uncle, but someone, a professional. You need to get legal training in terms of where you can and can't carry a gun. You should look to get some intermediate training that talks about reloads and movement and use of cover and things like that. And then you should work your way up to exactly what you were talking about, where you're doing scenario stress testing, where you're being put into unknown situations. It's not going to be, okay, we're going to go to the line, we're going to load a magazine of 10 rounds, we're going to shoot 2 rounds each time no, you're just going to say, you're buying gas. Go. And you go walking in like, what's happening? And there's all these people, and then one of them does something, and you're like, and you have to have the honesty and the humility to go, well, I kind of effed up there because I didn't perform, and then that humility then makes you a better firearms owner because you realize it's not all about just putting holes in paper. There's so much more. So it's not quite the very end, but it's like the last chapter is training of my book, and it's all about, here's what you should be aiming for, and you should spend money on it because it'll be a lot cheaper than the legal fees.
It can be the 1% of your life that is 100% of everything.
Yeah.
And so, and my ideal, like my goal, and I'll end on this note, I envision an America where it's understood there is a culture, not of just guns, but effective and efficient and safe utilization of firearms by the vast majority of people in America. Even the people that don't own guns know how to use them effectively, legally, and smart, and safely. And it's just understood worldwide. People in America, they are gun people in the same way that people look at the samurai, so to speak.
You know what would be cool? You know what would be really awesome? And I know this is like a crazy thought. Imagine if they taught it in school, like firearms safety. Imagine if they taught firearms safety. You don't have to have a gun, but we just want to have a class, a mandatory class in high school that covers firearms safety, so kids don't pick up guns and shoot themselves or their buddy. So the kids decide if it's a sport they want to get into. So kids, and so everybody has this level playing field of everybody knows. Everybody knows what works, myths, realities.
I'm telling.
If your friend has a gun, you want to stay away from them, or you want to be their friend, whatever. Let's put it out. Let's educate everybody. That would be effective.
Yeah,
and that would really tie into what you just said, where everyone like, they teach that crap in school,
and then everyone's like. No, we want to teach them about being fish, and the next day they could be a monkey, and then a girl, then a boy, then a rat, then a dog, which by all means, do what you do, I guess. But the fact that we live in a country with over 400 million guns and we don't teach baseline gun safety in schools is fucking ridiculous.
It's but I think it would be groundbreaking. I think it'd be very effective. Yeah. But it's one of those things, isn't it, where sometimes you have to do things that seem a little bit odd in order to get the right results, and you think, we never thought about doing it like that.
Fucking hey. But no, man, it's always a good time speaking with you, man. You definitely need to do this again.
But, please, it's fun.
But for the people who don't know who you are, just let them know where they can find you online, so forth and so forth, your training and on your books and all that stuff.
Okay, so if you look on Amazon, you'll see my first book, Sheepdog with a Black Belt. That's all about my martial arts experiences. The book coming out soon is going to be So You Want to Get a Gun. So that's going to be coming out probably in the next month. I just need to, there's some proofreading, it's a lengthy process. Then there's pewpew.kravmaga.biker is my Instagram, because those are things I do. I do pew pew, I do Krav Maga, and I ride motorcycles. So if you're interested in anything else, there's nothing else on it except motorcycles, guns, and fighting. In fact, I'm so sad. So look, I'm not sure you can see, that's the tattoo on my arm. That's a Glock
awesome.
Internals.
Oh, that is dope.
Then that's the internals of a motorcycle engine, and then that's a warrior called the pugilist at rest. So those are the three things I do.
I love it. I freaking love it.
That's it. That's my life. Yeah.
That's I think, if you ask me, the only way to live. But no, thanks for coming on, brother. I really appreciate it.
You know, we talk a lot about empowerment in this country, except for when it comes to the Second Amendment. However, I can't think of anything more empowering than having the most effective tool to protect you and your family. So help me spread this message by liking and sharing this video with everyone you know. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment, because the Second Amendment, when it said militia, it wasn't talking about the government. It was talking about you. Also, if you want to know where to find the I'm the Militia shirt and merchandise, click the I'm the Militia link in the description section of this video. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, make sure you hit that bell symbol.